think we got it now. I don't know. Can we switch this out, Peggy? Can we switch this out, Peggy, or?
I think so. I didn't get into tech, but you should be able to.
I'm gonna just copy whatever this looks like.
Yeah. So we'll do one at a time. Hopefully that'll work.
And if not, I can email things to me, but
To
myself.
log into the.
Yeah,
So I don't know if you have this port.
I probably don't, or this one either.
No.
Okay, that's fine. What I'll do is I'll just email myself.
And then log into it. Let me know if you need anything.
Okay. Thank you. How are you?
I'm just helping you out with
Okay.
editing and stuff. Do you have everything?
I think so, but now it's saying I have a sign-in error.
I could try mine.
Okay.
Hold on, nobody follow me. Shit, I hope nobody follow me to the
Just log in Gmail. Thank you. slowly. It's loading slowly. And I don't know if I can put my phone. But it's not loading like it should. And I don't know if this fits.
Go get Texas.
Yeah, he's right there.
He's over there. Oh, okay.
Let me try something. I don't know if I have anything like that. It's not, the internet seems to be loading really slow, so I can't access it. You know, I'm gonna try.
Let me see what you have on your laptop. Okay. So you want to just remove this guy?
Okay. Oh, okay.
I told you I was here to help you.
Oh, there we are. All right. Thank you. Okay, here we go. All right, thank you.
All right.
Hi, everybody. Sorry for the technical difficulties. Okay, first and foremost, I am in awe that you all are here to support this topic. It just brings smiles to my face, and I hope you enjoy it. Let's see. Where do we start? Okay, first and foremost, I am Elizabeth Carter. I currently manage and have founded and manage a boutique law firm that specifically represents Black co-ops, but also Black businesses, nonprofits, with the legal strategy and compliance of raising capital from the community investor. Oh, thank you. Thank you. I would say my motivation for the capital piece is because I do have experience and background in the organizing and mobilizing co-ops in my time during New Jersey. So my experience there, when I relocated to Chicago and I decided, like, how do I want to spend my time, it was really the capital piece that I wanted to focus on that was missing, you know, not just from co-ops, but just Black communities in general. And so yes, that's what I do. That's who I am. This session, though, the motivation of this session does stem from my experience personally, but also as I'm talking to other colleagues in this space, particularly those that are working on behalf of Black and Latinx communities, is sort of a realization, but also a frustration when it comes to developing productive institutions like co-ops in our communities. And so part of that, it has to stems from, and I'm gonna be honest, this idea of white supremacy and what does that look like in solidarity economy, which is designed to be just, designed to be, you know, equitable, designed to promote sustainability, but yet not publicly, I guess, we're not addressing the issue of sort of this dependency and the paternalism that's within solidarity economies and co-ops, where our communities are constantly dependent on, you know, and it could be benevolent, you know, white allies, et cetera, but we have to depend on them to survive, it seems, right? And so this session is sort of exploring that and really just to illustrate, to show, also to demonstrate why and how Black co-ops matter and what does that mean to say that. So yeah, thank you again for joining me on this session, this ride. So I do want this sort of a discussion, right? As a discussion amongst ourselves, I think that's more fruitful. And I'm assuming you all know what a co-op is, which is why I don't have the basic definition that we always see. But if we don't know, you know, we can start off there. But I wanted to start off with this quote by James DePhilippis, who was actually a professor of mine when I was in grad school at Rutgers Urban Planning School. And this was actually requoted by Jessica Nimbard in one of her pieces. But him recognizing that the history of co-ops in this country stems from Black history, Black organizing efforts. And I think that's very important because, again, going back to why Black co-ops matter, it involves our history matters, right? Why we're in this space stems so much, or so deeper than what we see today and the efforts today. Again, going beyond economics and towards a history of self-determination, political identity, and social cohesiveness. So, like I said, it's going to be a discussion. I do want to know from you all. So, what is your particular experience with co-ops? And it can be any, whether personal, working on behalf of, and also these questions of what is the purpose of us forming these cooperatives, generally and particularly in the Black community? Are they merely economic tools? Are they social tools, political tools, all the above? And is it something uniquely different about Black co-ops than sort of white co-ops or other co-ops? I mean, just open it to anyone that feels comfortable with sort of discussing these questions. Uh-huh.
I mean, at least for myself, I haven't had, what you say, hands-on direct. However, kind of coming through the different setups of so-called co-ops, a lot of times I find, particularly that we are going through, it's becoming whitewashed in a sense.
Okay.
And then it's that constant fight that we can't get to the root for the whole reason why we started anyway.
Right.
So it's just trying to figure a different mindset of how we approach that. Because just like you said at the end of the day, they are pretty much overseas. So you have to find some way to define yourself and let them know that I'm important. You're not going to downplay what our role, and particularly within my community that is being gentrified.
Where are you from? Where are you located?
Point Breeze in Philadelphia, I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
So like when you come to Jersey, you have to let us know.
Yeah.
Get together, find it. But thanks to my one of my community people, she fought. It was like pulling teeth, but we were able to kind of regain control of what was becoming a mess and the dictation of what is going to be in our community, because we still have a good amount of Black homeowners. And so one of my goals is to, do a community map to see what the resources are and to engage more long-term residents to get involved, not physically, but in some other way, getting involved with the community garden that we have and start growing, but trying to find a healing garden as well, because it's a lot of healing. I mean, we are definitely traumatized, and we need to recognize that at first. So when we, move in these spaces, we are kind of cognitive of what's really happening
Right.
and what ain't happening.
Right. So I'm hearing healing. I heard traumatized. I heard gardens. In other words, I'm hearing beyond economics, right? I'm hearing so much more. Would you say that's your motivation for co-ops involves what?
Well, I mean, in order to grow economically, you got to be healthy.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be of a healthy mindset, because otherwise you get, polluted with stuff that really is not important to the overall goal.
Right.
So addressing that, because a lot of times, particularly historically for us, we just kind of go along and do what we have to do, but we never really do that self-healing. And then, other people come in and direct you from which country, what you show up for,
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, economics is very important, but we got to kind of heal because we are really traumatized.
Right. And so is that others' experience as well? I mean, this is Philadelphia, maybe different. Anyone else? Any?
So, and what she's saying is I see like the co-op business model and ecosystem as a socio-economic tool. Is that it's not either or, it's a combination of both. Because it's to me, it's not just even about the equity or equitable access, but is the co-op model gives us a sense of taking ownership of our own sense of self-efficacy from an individual, a family, and community level. So we pray, or we hope for equity, but is the one thing that we can truly take ownership of is our own sense of efficacy, our own sense of being able to get it done, feeling empowered to take ownership of our power, place, and of prosperity. You know what I mean? And this to be that common purpose in order to move ourselves forward as a people.
Right. Right.
I think black co-ops definitely differ from other co-ops, white co-ops in particular, because historically this has been a way to gain access to tools that were inaccessible to us.
Mhm.
They still are. And also, I think a number of black people see co-ops as a tool towards liberation. It's not the end all be all, like in, some of the white ones where it's like, oh, we have this food co-op and that's the whole project. Whereas black people are like, we're trying to get free. This is one of the tools we are going to use to get there. And so I think that's a major difference too, which to your point and yours, it is economic, political, and social too.
Good point. Yeah.
So I think it's all clear. The reason why is because I believe that cooperative starts in the home. Explaining to my children back at home is that I am a single parent and I do need your help. Not in the sense of just financial, but sometimes you might have to take the garbage out. Sometimes you got to cook dinner, all to achieve the greater goal, which is our liberation today. My experience with the difference between black co-ops and white co-ops is that it's just the goal.
Hmm.
I would relate it to like going to church back in the civil rights movement. You went to church not for religion but to work religion. Co-ops, to Mrs. Statement right here, is a place of healing. There are some things that are sold in co-ops that you could never find in legitimate grocery store. We're told systematically to go and shop for goods and services. But getting back down to being for all three, economic, social, and political. Because within the political realm, we can advocate with strength in numbers. In the social realm, we can give, we can serve, we can communicate, we can collaborate. In the economic realm, we can make money. I mean, there's room for all of us there's room for many markets to be in. It's not defined on just food. It's not defined on just health and wellness. There's housing co-ops. When you think about the co-op structure, it exists in a lot of different business structures that we all look at. We just have to pull it out.
Mhm. Right. Yeah.
Yep, I definitely agree with what everybody else said, and just to add to that, it's also about building legacy. And I'm a part of the West Georgia Farmers Co-op. It's like one of the oldest black-owned co-ops, I think in the Southeast, but it's over like 55 years old. And our predecessors and our ancestors, left things and put things in place for us to continue this legacy. It's a whole lot bigger than just economics. We're building on a foundation that was already created before us and taking it to like the next level.
Right.
So, and again, focusing on healing and like representing the wholeness of farmers, not just the economics or the social or the political, but everything, and bringing all of that kind of care concept of farmers into what we do.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. And
If I'm honest, I started my cooperative work looking at the Democracy Collaborative in Cleveland.
okay.
And because we were in a neighborhood that was facing gentrification, it was purely economic. How can we give residents an opportunity to increase their household income so they can afford to live in the neighborhood? And it was only until I started cooperative education and cooperative development did I realize that if you're dealing with black people and the legacy of people of African descent, then it has to be more. But when I started, it was only about the economic piece. And think if you think about cooperatives meet the needs of its member owners, it's set up to meet its social, economic, and cultural needs, right? Then it has to be. But I didn't start that way because I was thinking about how can we give people jobs and opportunities to stay in their neighborhood. And it was only until I dealt with the people themselves that I had to create some new tools to even get the business going because we have so many other needs.
Yes. Well said. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say that I had experience with co-ops in the early 70s, but the significance for me has always been when I look at the black co-ops versus the white co-ops, there's a certain frequency and rhythm that's associated with black co-ops because they get more intense clear
Spiritual,
about that.
cultural.
Because that's why you're doing it. You're doing it to make things better, not just for you, but for other people. There's also this piece about the mind change. Because so many people, when you talk about co-ops, they don't really get it because they're concerned about I versus we. And once you, there's a political, psychological piece that's associated with that in terms of getting people to start thinking more about us. But at the same time, realizing that us means me too. You know, so that to me is a challenge, especially in our community, because we've been trained to think a certain way, more so than others.
Yeah. I love this discussion.
I want us as a people to get away from thinking that even us as a people, meaning black people, have to think about it. I think that there's a discouraging conversation that comes about when it says that just because of our skin color we have to shop at co-ops, rather than the lady said, figuring out what your need is and figuring out how to because even us all as black people in this room don't all think, believe, see, worship, walk, talk, or anything the same. We're all still individuals. Even though we all come from the same diaspora, there's over 52 countries in our diaspora. So, it can get deeper than that, but I think that, moving forward into these generational conversations, understanding that it's not all spiritual for people. It's not all healthful for people. It's not all mental. It's not all, we all coming from different spaces of need and for want. And how, and from the co-op perspective, operating co-op perspective, is how do we service those needs and our wants? Not just getting you to think like me, or getting you to walk like me, or getting you to, take lemon balm like it's not about that. This can help with X, Y, and Z, but you should come here because this is what you have. This is what we have to offer.
Thank you.
So I've been into co-ops from a research perspective as basically looking at sustainability and what's not sustainable and what is, right? And so even in this conversation, I think that looking at culturally individual versus collective is the shift that has to happen. Even if we're not all doing this all together, we need to agree on where they want to go, what they want for their community, and community self-determination. Versus folks doing, as this culture has taught us, what I can do to survive and basically keeping us trapped in that. So for me, it's all about community self-determination, however you define your community, but it's necessary to shift culturally back to that idea of collectivism versus individualism.
Yeah. And I want to continue this because we probably will have some time, but I do want to kind of tie it all in because ultimately we're all essentially saying it is beyond economics. It's economics, but so much more. And as part of the political identity is more than just electoral politics. It's an organizing tool saying we have a shared collective history and struggle, so we should come together collectively for this particular collective agenda, right? And socially and everything that's been said. And it's not surprising that we do feel that way. I can skip over, because I do want to touch on two things there, but what I like, and I'm sure you all by now have read Jessica Nimbar's Collective Courage book, but she mentioned a group called Neshoba Commune that was attended and organized originally back in 1825 as a black commune, but it was organized by a white woman suffragist. And so eventually what happened was the power imbalance between white free people and black enslaved and even black free people became a struggle. And so as Jessica pointed out, the community struggled both socially and politically with black members not being allowed to hold leadership positions. And so this shows the history of what we're dealing with today. It may look different, but the paternalistic history of black co-ops has been there, especially when the power imbalance have been there, particularly politically, when we identify as whether we were enslaved or just getting some type of political economic freedom. And so it's not a surprise that we are seeing this today. It's not a surprise that we are talking about spiritual, cultural, social, in addition to economics, because the history has been, even when there were opportunities to, because the intent of this particular project was economic, right? For you to get your economic freedom. You can pay off your slave debt, you know, blah, blah, blah. It was purely economic, but didn't recognize that more than just economics, people wanted to have self-determination, be able to decide for themselves. And so this sort of like resonated with me for this presentation because it really shows that, yeah, we can, even if everyone was okay economically, and I think that's like the basic, at some point we're gonna start looking to how do we make these decisions on by ourselves, how do we make sure our culture is retained over time, et cetera. And so in line with that is, again, just the Black experience, right? I wanted to show this because these are today's co-ops that are Black-led and controlled, that do go beyond economics and are successful at it. So we have Sweet Liberty, which is a Black co-op in formation, one of my clients. So we're working on it, but they operate and work together collectively, socially for a while, and they focus on healing, and they're really about roots, and they're very conscious, and yet they're successful with revenues, right? They just reached, I believe, at least $1 million this year in revenues. Crux Co-op kind of grew fast, but focused on Black artists, Black control, Black community, and yet they have also amassed millions of dollars in revenues. And so it's important to point that out because I think we see a lot of failures in our community, and part of it is that we're not looking at the multidimensional aspect of co-ops. And I do want to illustrate National Public Housing Museum, which is, they're fairly new in their project here in Chicago. And what they're doing, so this is, I guess you can argue National Public Housing Museum is white-led, but what they're doing, I think it's an illustration of good allyship, is that instead of taking control and being part of the actual leadership of the co-op, they're allowing space for the people in the community and the public housing residents to actually form their own co-op. So I wanted to show just a quick clip of what they're doing in the project there to show that I think the most successful co-ops are those that do allow for that self-determination, cultural development, spiritual development, in addition to economic development. And hopefully it plays with this internet. Turn this up. Uh-oh. So that's currently in Chicago. They're organizing, and I think they actually just launched, if not soon. And I should know, I'm on the advisory board, but a co-op owned store by the public housing residents. So the things, culture and just community is definitely something that's resonated throughout that will retain when you have Black leadership, right? Because it's not just about economics. And so here I wanted to show how white supremacy shows up today. Mind you, I know all of these people, so there's no shade to anybody. But it is something that we talk about, and I think we need to talk about more and start these conversations and be more critical of it. So Shy Fresh Kitchen in Chicago as well is a Black-owned commercial food service business composed of formerly incarcerated women in Chicago, Black women. It was organized and started by Camille Kerr, who's a lawyer, but white adjacent, white, can probably identify as white. I think she identifies a woman of color, but really definitely white adjacent. And they recently received a $150,000 grant from an organization called Workers Lab. And this is the presentation that they have in terms of like showing who the awardees were. What was problematic about that is that although it's Black owned and controlled, her face of it definitely shows probably a wrong message to the public about who's in control. Now, not to say that, because again, how people want to be organized is their choice. And so I think part of the issue is that, people are okay with that. That's in the organization. That's what I'm going to defer. Anyone else should defer to that. But on the grand scheme, when we think about our communities and how we should move forward, it does matter who's controlling in decision making. Because if that person leaves because they are operating as a co-op developer, would those Black women be able to maintain that company and that business over time, right? Or will they continue to need this support from outside to do so? And so that I wanted to highlight that because again, what we see today is that when it's white-led, it is focused on economics. Let's get it done quick. Let's get some revenue in. Let's get some business and jobs, which is great, as you mentioned earlier here in the front. I don't remember your name, but at some point, right? When does it become a co-op and less of just a business operating, right, as employees? Similarly, a little different, is the Main Street Phoenix project, which is actually was spearheaded by a white male attorney out of Colorado, Jason Weiner. So Jason is basically the father of this platform cooperative, I guess it's going to be. It's still in the works. And the idea is to acquire restaurants, particularly in Chicago and other urban areas that have predominantly Black and Latinx restaurant workers, where they will buy the company, and then the employees are employees of the platform cooperative, and somehow their decision making. And the reason why I say that because I don't think they have fully fleshed out the co-op piece, but nevertheless they're raising capital as if it is a co-op. And I will say they did receive a grant and grant funding, at least $350,000, from for sure from a local Chicago organization. Again, this is someone that's out of Colorado, white male, not a Black or brown restaurant worker in Chicago, and yet was able to receive this funding just on a concept alone, right? And so going back to Tweet Liberty and Crux on the prior slide, they haven't raised capital. They are successful based on their services and products, right? And so they become successful raising revenue. But the difficulties in raising capital, even with that much revenue, is still there for Black-led and Black-owned and controlled organizations. Meanwhile, a white man from Colorado can come to Chicago and say, I need $350,000 for this concept to prove, and he gets it. That's the reality. The working world, I like Brendan, but Brendan will also tell you, his privilege when he started the working world was because who he knew, wealthy other white men, who gave him the funding to then refinance or to put funding towards the conversion of businesses. And the organization does focus on Black and brown across the world, so that they are worker owners of this newfound business. However, and so right now, in 2019, their tax returns, the 990, it's a nonprofit, was about a little over $3.3 million. So this organization receives funding from major philanthropic organizations like, what's the big ones? Kellogg, but it's I don't know if it's directly that, but yeah, the big, large ones are national billion-dollar endowments. And so he has relationships now with them, and the money funnels through, and then he finances the conversion, which is a loan to this new worker-owned co-op, and so over time they pay it back through their revenue. So as the workers are working, they pay it back. The issue though with that, again, because economics is first, when it's not led by black, there isn't really real training or education. So a lot of these workers are not operating as a co-op, or the working world is still part of the organization decision-making structure. So they're still part of the board, they're still ultimately making the decisions. And so again, it begs the question, when does the dependency and paternalism go away, and when does the autonomy and independence, so going back to the Rochdale principles, which is a European start of the principles, I thought they were relevant to us, the autonomy and independence, which again are something that people have adopted all over the world about co-ops, and yet we still see this dependency when it comes to black-owned co-ops. And then the education and training, we see a lot of that being bypassed for the sake of, let's create something quick, let's get some money in, and again, these organizations and people who are leading it are also getting paid, right? So it starts to look very extractive and exploitative itself. If we're not taking that time over time to build that culture, change that mindset, understand some of the trauma and the healing that needs to be done, because it will take a while. But if you're coming from the outside looking to get something done quick, you're not concerned with that. And you could indirectly cause more harm than good by doing that. Mm-hmm. Which one? Oh, Sweet Liberty is, they do a number of things. I say ultimately are a healing organization, but they have been contracted out by various large organizations to do DEI work, diversity, equity, and inclusion. So very and they will tell you that it's been very hard for them to actually accomplish that. Especially with the wake of 2020, it was like everybody wanted that. And then when you get down and dirty, it looks like something else. And so, which is very traumatizing for them, right? And so it's different things going on, but that's what they do for the most part. But they have a lot of different goals, particularly the aim is to build healing spaces, whether it's real estate and places where, people are housed or go there to heal. That's ultimately what they do, yeah. They're all over, but I would say the headquarters is in California. Yeah, in the Bay Area. No, I'm sorry. Yeah, the Bay. Main Street, Phoenix.
Are you going to have access to the print list?
Oh, I can. Yeah, for sure. I can send it. Okay. So we went through that. I do want to show though how. Because at the end of the day, we were actually talking about this earlier at the table. We're still in a capitalistic society. We're still in a society where literally all the dollars are funded. It's like a triangle, right? And so we can talk about, black wealth or black income. So even if all of us came in the room together and said, put our money together in one pot, we can say what comes from black hands. But then you look even beyond that and say, well, where do they get their money from? And so then you start to see it's still the same octopus head, right? And so I think what the challenge is that we do what we can now and constantly work to dismantle it entirely. And ultimately what we would get at is that the system is so operating within the capitalistic system is just problematic for not just black co-ops, people in general, but particularly marginalized people. But I will say this, before we get there, there's ways to get there even with white allyship, true allyship. And like I said, part of that has to be where the white-led organization or person has to understand that the leadership, control, and actual ownership has to rest in the hands of black people. So even if you're supportive, whether it's, we'll talk about what that look like. It looks like, redistributing your resources, your contacts, co-applicants, right? Of that grant, of that funding source, so that it's not just, looking as if we need this white support to receive anything, even though it's our work, our hands, our labor. But I want to point out to this organization called Start.coop, which changed a lot, still has a lot of work, but changed a lot because of Jessica Mason, who actually wrote an article called Black Co-ops Matter, which sparked the interest in really diving deep into this. And it was interesting as a white woman thinking about this. But I want to just kind of illustrate what she said as she was thinking about this in her work. But she's definitely transformed. Start.coop is an organization, sort of like an incubator of co-ops. They do have a model that's designed to sort of scale co-ops in a way that you'll scale any business, right? So their argument is that just because it's a co-op doesn't mean that it can't receive investors or grow to a certain size and become productive on a large scale. And so they've done a lot of racial equity work within the organization, particularly when Jessica came on board, meaning their leadership has diversified, meaning the recipients of the participants have diversified. And I don't know if this clip gonna show that or her explaining that, but also they do provide funding. But again, the leadership control and ownership remains with the Black co-op. So so this is the interview series that my firm has put on, and she's the sort of inaugural start of the interview series because of her article and sort of starting it off. But I also want to just highlight that in the system that we're in, it doesn't mean that we operate outside, or let me change that up. White allyship has a place, and we can utilize it if we want, but it has to look like true allyship. And so I thought she was a good example of that. So, I got this so low. Is there a way to turn this up? Is anybody in here from tech? It's yeah, it's on that thing there instead of my computer. Okay, well it's not long, hold on, maybe. That's too long. Can anybody hear that?
Cover your speaker with the mouse. Put your mouse over to the speaker. No, the mouse.
No, it's coming from there.
Right. But is the YouTube, is the volume up on the YouTube?
Uh-huh.
And then what about the volume on your actual laptop?
Yeah, it's at 100%.
Okay.
See, it's at 100. So it's that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
What about go down to your taskbar real quick on Windows.
Yes. So, I mean, to me, being out here, that's better. Right. And what does being anti-racist mean to you, specifically within the co-op community? Yeah, so, I mean, to me, being anti-racist, it means tearing down everything that lets white supremacy thrive, right? It means completely undermining white supremacy and saying, enough is enough, we can't continue on like this, we have to do everything we can, so at every turn we're taking actions that undermine rather than perpetuate white supremacy. And in doing so, that we are uplifting Black and brown communities and activists uplifting Black and brown entrepreneurs. So for us, it's thinking about every aspect of our program and every aspect of our interactions with our community and saying, how are we uplifting those who want to succeed, and how are we working together to break down the innumerable systems that are out there to stop Black and brown entrepreneurs from being able to build these beautiful businesses, these beautiful co-ops. And not just beautiful co-ops, I mean, that's a very co-op-y thing to say, right? But these really successful co-ops who are going to go off and do incredible things in the world. And so I sort of personally see it as my role is to break down the barriers to success for the entrepreneurs in our program. And so for our Black and brown entrepreneurs, if that means that I need to be a part, and we need to be a part of breaking down systems of oppression, that's where we need to be, and that's what we need to be doing. And I'm pleased to be on that journey alongside our Black and brown entrepreneurs. This isn't a case of us leading or knowing what's best, but really working with the entrepreneurs in our program and those in our community to say, well, how can we do this together, and what does this look like? How do we bust down all of those barriers so that you really have every opportunity to thrive and to build an incredible corporate business? Right, like asking, like, what do you need, and then, you know, also making sure you already are very vocal about it, but, you know, I think that's what it means too, is like not being afraid to be vocal about how you feel, about how you want to be anti-racist. I feel like sometimes people want to be, but maybe they're like a little bit nervous, or I'm not sure. I mean, these are hard conversations that our country has been having, and I think it's great that we're continuing this conversation. have to be afraid to make, or not afraid to make mistakes, to make missteps, right? We as an organization and me as an individual, I've made numerous mistakes and missteps when it comes particularly to issues of race. You know, we are all on a journey learning. I say we, white people, are on a journey learning about how to be allies and advocates to, you know, our Black and brown peers, and that's going to be a journey in which we make mistakes. And we have to sort of have the courage to say, okay, we're going to put ourselves out there and do this, and recognize that it's not always going to go right, but it is on us to break down the system that we built and to build back, collectively build back a system that is stronger and better, but first and foremost, more equitable.
I think that's a good representation of what allyship should and could look like in terms of, you know, recognizing the roles. Because going back to the historical, what was that? The historical perspective where white leadership was at the forefront, where they made the decision making. They were saying what's best. So at least starting off with the understanding that the community knows what's best. And it may not in 100 years from now be a co-op, and that's okay, right? Because I think sometimes we get caught up, particularly again, within white co-ops, that co-ops are the end-all, be-all, but it's really about the community. And Ron mentioned that earlier, right? It's like we're here to build community, whether it's in the form of co-ops, a commune, or whatever. The entity itself is just a means, but the end point is for us to build community. And so, in conclusion, really,
Real quick, ma'am, that one right there, can you pull that up one more time?
The what?
One that's on right now.
right here?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Uh-huh. Go ahead.
So at the end, she made a statement that, I guess, I'm paraphrasing, but it was a job to help build, advocate and help build co-ops. I kind of disagree, and the reason why is I think that.
I think you didn't hear him right. He said build a better world, tear down and build back. That's what
Yeah,
I heard.
she was saying the systems, the inequities in the system. Mm-hmm.
So the issue, I guess the situation that I guess from what I heard is that Black people have been building this for years, and it has been consistently, constantly been talked about. White, at the same time, white supremacy has been getting built. So I think that or where the allyship could really help is that white allies focus on tearing down white supremacy. We don't necessarily need you to help build because we've been doing that. We just need you to focus on tearing down white supremacy.
Right.
That's it.
Right.
Once you start getting involved into the other parts of it, then privilege starts to seep in, capitalism starts to seep in, and all the issues that the reason why we're building this in the first place start to seep in. I think that's kind of, I guess it's misunderstanding. I'm misunderstanding.
Well, no, yeah, I think what she was saying was what you're just saying, like working towards tearing down white supremacy and working alongside in support of Black co-op development, other co-op development. And again, we should, and as she said, they're going to make mistakes. We should continue to critique and refine because they're not going to get it right because you have blinders on, right? If if that's not your lived experience, you have to listen to people, right? You have to really, really pay attention to what the community is saying if they want you there, right? And that's another thing. And I think that's the allyship. It's not saying, well, I know what's best. You should want money because you're poor. It may make rational sense, but you don't know you know what I mean? Whoever decision that is the people's decision to make. And I think, and then also even if you do go in saying, well, we have all these jobs, then the question is what kind of jobs? And we go down a rabbit hole of you still think it's best for whatever reason, right? Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, just to further clarify what I heard, I think the key point that underlies the broader statement was that she was saying that if they really want to show that they're an ally, that they should claim this as part of their responsibility, their obligation to do that. So that was what was key for me in terms to the tearing down and building up. Like, first of all, recognize that this needs to be done, that it needs to be torn down. And because I think a lot of white folk don't, they want to be allies, not to speak for all black folk, all white folk, but they really don't, they don't know how, like their interpretation of being an ally is like unbelievable. It's like, yeah, and it's almost as if it comes off like they're superior in their knowledge.
Right.
And it doesn't matter how educated you are, like you can have the same thing they have and more, okay? And some of the ones that don't even have that still come off with that attitude because of how they were raised. You know, especially the Karens of the world. I have one of those in my pocket. So I really, really get this. And I heard about this before. No, seriously, I heard about it before and I saw it on television. But when you really experience it, it is amazing. I mean, this white woman started off, she was a new neighbor, and I'm black captain, and she, you know, I'm trying to be, you know, nice and helpful. But like her language was so coded. She comes from North Carolina, and her daughter is like one of the new DAs, newly had. Now I had my law degree, so I'm like, okay, right? I turned down the job to be able to go to the DA's office, but I'm good with that, right? She's a newly hired DA in Philadelphia, and so this woman, I guess she saw it like trying to kind of make this correlation. She said, "Oh, her daughter has dreadlocks." Right? But wait, but okay, but then she said, well, but really she's had dreadlocks since she was 8 years old because, well, she didn't really have to have dreadlocks. She was just too lazy to learn how to do her own hair. And I'm saying, whoa, like there's a bunch of stuff in this statement, right? The word lazy, okay, look at you adopted this black kid to raise, and what mother, I don't care what, raise you for, what mother expects their child to do their own hair at 8 years old? Whether the kid is male or female, I raised 2 sons. I didn't expect them to do that. You know, come on. But that's just where it started, and it has gotten progressively worse to the point where, I see this woman as like pure evil. Just through the stuff that she has done, because she does things like claiming a neighbor has rats climbing up your wall on a property that was being rehabbed, but then we caught her stepping up on a stool, reaching over her fence, right? Putting cat food, not dry cat food, because I, had a dog for 18 and a half years. Wet food and dry food are 2 different things, right? Putting wet food in the yard of the neighbor to draw this. And then when she was confronted, she like did a meltdown thing, like, oh, well, I said I was sorry, she says, and then she says, well, I've just been told not to interact with you at all. It has just gotten worse to the point, this stuff is unbelievable. You can't even make it up. You can't even make it up.
So it goes to the point of, and it can happen in gender spaces as well, sexism. When you can't just start off with everybody kumbaya, because we come with a lot of stuff that we gotta undo. And it's a lot of hands. I know you had it, but I'm hearing it because this is what people need to hear, right? Instead of others telling us what's needed, because it will look like, again, supremacy. But go ahead.
How white people in it have to first, get out of their denial of, and their delusion that whiteness is a thing. So kind of like James Baldwin said, we're celebrating 100 years too soon. That part is really their problem. So on our part, to basically kind of help our communities sustain the fall that is going to come, because it is unsustainable, that's where black co-ops matter, right? For our communities
Yeah, because black folks adopt white supremacy too. White people have adopted black people have adopted white supremacy as well. So that's a whole other complex.
That's another thing. Like, right, that's another thing. Think about it in this way. If you really want to see change, you have to see one's advantages as a part of a coin to the other disadvantages. They're completely linked. And people in this country would have to give up a lot, in order to really see that, like, fairness and equity globally as well, right? So I'm not even going to get into the global aspect, but and folks are not ready to do that.
Right. You had a question, and then you.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, one, thank you for your presentation, and I think it's a buyer's beware. You know, coming out of black nationalism, you know, coming out of the independence movement, but building black carpenters, I've worked with a lot of white allies. I just have. And people have said, I'm not doing that, you working with MIT, good riddance. But for me, on the practical level, right? And I think it's buyers beware. You do have, and thank you for this because I think it helps say you just need to be mindful when dealing with white people, the kind of baggage they bring. Like when you have to deal with the black bourgeoisie, and I got a whole nother take on that. But anyway, it's a buyer's beware. But I think, you know, thinking strategically, there is no uniformity in this work. The brothers and sisters who say they just gonna wait for black people still don't have the credit union. No offense, I don't mean anything against them, right? They still in the study circle. No offense, I really don't mean anything for them. And I'm serious, and I say to you, but I say to them, literally, I respect the way you're moving, right? But for me and the people who need a job yesterday, I'm moving this way. And I need to be mindful and aware of your critique helps me, but there is no uniformity. When you're on the ground building these things, you have to build with the tools and the resources that you have. And I just want to say that. So for me, there are no hard lines. Malcolm said, I have no permanent enemies and no permanent friends, right? I mean, I think just in this work, and you have to say where there are no white people, because this space, we're just in a learning space, and white people can't be here because, you know, we need to have a safe space, but, you know, we'll work with you on the funding, whatever, you know, just have those conversations. But for me, it's a dynamic set of situations. And I think we have to adapt and make these analyses. But thank you, because it's important for us to always remember how white supremacy, you know, exists on the individual, the meso, and the macro level. Right. Because we have to deal with them when we see it.
Exactly. Yeah, no, you're welcome. Thank you all for your contribution. Okay, you had your hand up, right?
Me?
No? Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just wanted to just really quick, I had my hand up earlier, I was like, well, y'all are handling it. But just really quickly, take it even further from an academia point of view, even when it comes to, I work with black farmers. We go to conferences all the time, right? And it's taught by usually academia. They're the so-called experts, and I used to work in these spaces. These people didn't even go out and farm or do anything. But the idea of and that's where white supremacy comes into place, even with that. The fact that you think just because you have the degree, but not even the technical skills to get out there and work, you can teach us something. Right. So I just wanted to
that's good.
Back on, it's bigger than that. It's the whole construct is messed up.
That's good. It was, I think your hand was, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I'm speaking from the viewpoint of openly as a revolutionary movement of black people for self-determination, right? And I think that when it comes to black folks, the biggest mistake we make is thinking that it is a such thing as white allyship. White supremacy rules the roost in this country completely and wholly, right? When we're dealing with white folks, we have to understand we're dealing with a particular face of the system. We are doing business. We are not allies. We may act like we allies, but this is business because of white supremacy, is just an extension of the system. So the other thing when it comes to it, the three principles that we got to adopt when it comes to white allyship: give up the power. You can't have no power here, right? And you have to understand that because you've stolen so much from us, because your people collectively keep our people living in a graveyard. You cannot have no power here. give up your control. You can't have no control there because you are only going to represent and reproduce the system. And then third, turn over the money. Even at this conference today, in this very room, a lot of white folks that say, but their presence even weakens our collective efficiency. It does. Because we can't go to a white conference where they're talking about white things and sit among them and listen.
Can I throw one more thing out? I'm sorry.
Because, go ahead, right here, but hold your thought, right here.
Well, and speaking on some of the things on the allyship is I like to always go back to Frank's and Lon's XWA. I feel like that every person, black or white, needs to understand that and to either listen or read that to see why and how we got to where we are today. And then is looking at on some of those same points is true allyship is giving up control of the power, the money, and decision making, because then is you're empowering that set of people or individuals to take sense of ownership of their own sense of self-determination and efficacy, and giving them the will to elevate themselves. So those are some of the things, and then is being willing to be uncomfortable. You know, with change, discomfort comes. So is even with people of color and those white individuals, is everybody has to be willing to accept that transformational discomfort. You know, and what does it look like? It may look different for each individual, but is, you know, when we look at it, it's not that always the people in the systems, it's the systems themselves. So is how do we disrupt those systems from where they're at? We can, like, again, I'll go back. We fight, hope, we pray for equity. You know, that's been going on for generations. But is we can truly take ownership of our own sense of efficacy. You know, and that's the real power that we have. And so is how do we aggregate those allyships, the work that's being done, and then collectively move forward our communities, our economies at scale in a way that really is impactful and lasting.
I've heard what everyone had to say, and I think everybody raised some good points, but I think one of the key things that, and I'm saying this true to all, and I'm internationalists and a Pan-Africanist, but we had to be prepared. So, you know, and that's the key word, is prepared. Because the game changes. The game is changing right now in front of each and every one of you. People are buying up millions and millions of acres of land. People don't understand why. True, the game is changing because economic currency is getting ready to change. Be aware of that. And the other issue is food. So, you know, and there's a lot more to that. So the discussion that we have is bigger than this, but it's relevant, okay, in terms of survival and maintaining whatever it is that you have for a longer period of time. So what we're talking about is sustainability. And so that's part of the education that we have to impart upon all people. Now, I'm into this oneness thing, but we're not ready for oneness, brother. I agree with you on that point, not at this point. But we all are dependent on each other in some way, shape, or form. Okay, the animals, the people, the birds, all that is connected. Because, you know, black folks don't want to deal with nature, but we got to deal with it. You know, we got to deal with it because that's our basic survival. So there's a lot of stuff going on that we need to know. It's about eliminating people, keeping people from talking to each other and sharing, like we're sharing right now. 2 years ago, you couldn't do this, right? So now we're sharing, we got different ideas, we go back and impart it to our community. But we need to be about being prepared. Okay, there's a lot more, I don't want to get into that right now, but there's a lot of stuff going on we need to be aware of. Okay, blessings again.
And then we come back.
I just appreciate, you know, all of the feedback, conversation, information that's being shared in this space. And thank you to the brother here and what you just stated. Just to shift slightly, I would say that one of the challenges that I find that many black co-ops or folks and black people encounter when trying to start co-ops in the very, very beginning stages is supposedly with white allies, and we're talking about like black co-ops as sites for healing from trauma, for building relationships, for being in community with one another. But then you have these supposed white allies, and I'm just white allies as a placeholder,
relationship building. You know what I'm saying? Like, it needs to be tangible for them. And it's not that relationship building is not tangible, right? It's just that white supremacy is disconnected from, spirit and source and truth and, land and all these things. And so I think that's one of the challenges that continues to come up. And it's so frustrating because you feel like, and in terms of the black bourgeois, like you get that from them as well. Well, what are y'all doing? We're donating. I'm from Atlanta where like there's the myth of the black Mecca. So I've had friends that have said, I grew up surrounded by blackness but we have a hard time seeing ourselves as oppressors down here. And so, now that gentrification is creeping into Cascade, my upper middle class friends are like, well, what do we do now? Well, you didn't do anything. You didn't do anything for the people in the West End in the 90s when it was being gentrified. You didn't do anything. Right. So, what is there to say for what's happening in your middle class neighborhood? But I done lost my train of thought.
But no,
relationship.
Yeah, and yeah.
Relationships. And so, what I would like from this space is for us to be thinking about and continuing to think about, because we're already thinking about it in our home spaces and bringing into this space our protection networks, our containers for survival, all the things that we need to be self-sustainable and determined so that we don't even have to look for a white allyship. Or try to rely or be disappointed by whiteness that is just going to continue to white and be white and be white and be white and white. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. Her, then you. Go ahead.
Can I just say something that hasn't been said? I don't think it has been. I was kind of loose. I got it 3 o'clock this morning, so y'all had like really rejuvenate me here. But the one thing that I haven't heard is the spiritual aspect of this. It was.
You mentioned it.
Did you say it?
Yeah.
Okay.
You can expound. Go ahead.
I want to use a particular word, discernment. Not spiritual in the broad side. That was a comma. It wasn't a period. What I just said earlier about what I haven't heard. I was going on to say the word discernment. Okay, because I think there needs to be a balance. Like I am all for don't take my black card, right? But I do think we be trying to balance it because it's my revolutionary over here to the left, right? But I do think that we can that I do believe that there can be white allies, and that's around the word of I'm unapologetically Christian, okay, and I respect all denominations and religions, but from that standpoint, because of what's poured into me and what is my truth, and I went to seminary also. I mean, this is my truth that I stand on. I do believe that there can be white allies who think like me, but I have to do the vetting, okay? And I have to use discernment, spiritual discernment that I pray for daily, okay? Because we even have enemies who look like us. And it's amazing that the weaker black folk want to be the ones in control and out front, the ones who can't use discernment and become so enthralled over the fact that white folk have chosen them to, kind of buddy up with because what I see happening is this whole divide and conquer, right? That they're used against stronger black folk like me. I got so many fights going on now. I almost didn't make it down here, okay? But it's like this drives me crazy. Not really, because I can handle it, but I'm just saying, it's amazing. No, it's amazing how people even create a narrative for themselves, black folk, and how they function with white skills, you just go down the list in terms of all the skills, but they then are in the way and causing more issues than what really need to exist.
Yeah.
So it's like, who was it that said being black in America is to be in a constant state of rage? Oh my God, it's incredible what people bring to you.
Yeah, and on that, I mean,
Try to set you up.
if we look to, so when Fred Hampton was organizing, right, he organized white Appalachia for them to organize themselves. He organized the Latinx, and I think that's also missing, because we talk about this too, when white people enter the black spaces or brown spaces, they're not organizing their communities, where it could be maybe a collaboration at some point, right, for a common enemy. But that doesn't really happen, and so it looks like power, it looks like what we've been all talking about, and maybe that's a lesson for the white allies, or quote-unquote allies, whatever word we're using, is to organize themselves, right, for those issues that and a lot of them deal with capitalistic. It's not, capitalism doesn't work for anyone, but a few, right? And so, yeah, that's also an issue, is that they're not organizing themselves, yet the power that they come to our spaces, they feel empowered to control what we're doing, but not as empowered to control their own communities, right?
Well, what we see, I'm sorry, just to piggyback on that, we do see this effort with regard to them mobilizing or empowering themselves. Because what they've now created, there's a whole power struggle going on in Philly, like all over Philly, right? So what's happening is people are organizing, they're creating organizations within larger I had a guy from New York tell me this. I guess he thought I was one of him. I don't know, right? Because I talk to everybody, I listen, right? And he was telling me how, and this is on a political level, because that's a whole different thing, right? But because we're organizing wards and divisions, and how in his ward, like they approached the ward leader because Robert's Rules of Order was not being used within the meetings, although the state Democratic Committee clearly states that it needs to be used with regard to governance. And so they approached the ward leader, who went off on them. So what they decided to do was create their own organizations within a larger organization. So I will say that there are instances where this organizing is happening. It's not necessarily to our benefit, but it's to build leadership development being used to build social capital, so that there can now be this impact on, or co-ops and these other kind of cooperative things that are going on within our community. It's amazing to see all this.
So, one of the issues that I have,
can I just say, he's had his hand up.
Oh.
I do want to I'm not a teacher, I'm sorry.
So, okay, say your point, and then we can go, and then I know you have your hand up. Well, go ahead.
One of the issues that I've seen that has been a problem within white supremacy, specifically in the state of Pennsylvania, is the inclusion of white women into, minority groups. And I think that to some part is a demise, because you don't have, my brother right here is the only white man in this room. But white men, as we know in this country, are the power holders. So when we have conversations like this, and we invite white women into a room, I don't want to say they're coming with the academia and not but the power holders in this room, that the people that hold power, we're not talking to, we're not maybe representing these things. They're also not a part of these conversations. They're not in this room to allow me to discern whether or not I can work with them. And I think that has been like a problem with me, even when working with some people from Philly, is that you have white women that will go and create these groups, and they come out with a whole new organization because they have the academia to get the paperwork done. We're still stuck on building block one. Like, I think there needs to be a step back approach with that or more discernment in a sense, where like white women, disincluding white women into this marginalized group of people can no longer be. Like, we are the minority. Yeah, they're not minorities. I mean, in a sense, but they're not.
Racially, yeah. Go ahead.
So, a lot of just, great things that, have been said. I really appreciate that statement, the sort of buyer beware, as a framing. And I think that But and then over here, you had talked about 3 things, so I just wanted to follow up. Do you kind of like what does it look like to integrate frameworks, like 3 points, 5 points, like how might that work? And then funding for relationship building check. I was just wondering if there, as we talk about healing, if there would be any space for cooperatives for sort of public safety, cooperatives for security, those sorts of things, and if there's any word around that.
I believe, well, I know in Chicago there's LCDC co-op is building a cooperatively owned security. So basically, a community security. It's not a police, right? We're not called the police. That's called this group type of thing, right? And I think we do need more of that because we do have real trauma in our communities, and yet the first response is more trauma, right? LCDC co-op in the west side Chicago. And I think we have about 5 more minutes, so. No, go ahead, take your time.
Hi, everybody. So, I just wanted to say I really enjoyed your presentation.
Thank you.
I enjoyed hearing from everybody, especially because a lot of what you're speaking about and sharing is very new to me, because where I'm from. So I know that we talk a lot about the Black experience and all of that, but the Black experience does vary depending on where you're coming from. So I'm from the Caribbean, so a lot of the concerns and a lot of the issues that you guys face here, you don't really experience some of those things. So I've only been here for a year, so it's all still very new, and I've been learning a whole lot, like I said, but it's like trying to balance, because it's like the quote that you said, being a Black person in America just feels like you're angry every day, and literally when I was driving in this morning, I was saying to myself, how are people just not angry every day? Because I feel so, by a lot of the things that I'm now seeing and learning about what happened in terms of history. So it's been really enlightening, and I just wanted to say I'm really happy that I'm here today.
No, for sure. And I think Black is such an American word too, because if you do go elsewhere, I don't know Black is used as much or the same way. Yeah.
We don't know. Back home, even the concept of, like here where you say African American or Asian American and like breaking it up into those categories, we don't. Even though back home we do have a melting pot of people. If you know how the whole slave system works in the Caribbean and the indentureship period where a lot of people migrated to the area, they all just kind of call themselves Jamaican. Nobody really splits it up Black. Yeah, and that in itself can be problematic, but
Well, Marcus Garvey gave us that language.
the language, the African American language.
Right.
I've heard. I haven't
Right.
read everything.
I think it's just hard to be proud when you call yourself American when you realize that the country doesn't exist.
But I love that though, and I think maybe like a part 2, 3, 4, 5 is like once we get ourselves together, how do we have this global connection? Because the issues of white supremacy crosses borders, and like you said, if we don't have this language, how to communicate. And I think you mentioned Pan-Africanism, and that it has been, and I shouldn't say it's over, but it's like a relearning of us coming together globally to deal with these similar issues. I do want to just close it up, and we can. So last but not least, basically this is a call to action and a normative statement, which should be, and that we should be doing something to make sure that we are leaders, controllers, owners of our housing, food, land, neighborhoods, especially because of the history where we haven't had an opportunity to not necessarily get it, but to retain it. And so that makes us different, right? It's not just about economics, it's about literally controlling ourselves, because we have been people that have been really, humanity was stripped from us, right? And so I just want to sort of end it that way, but I loved the conversation. And I do think we continue to have conversation in action. We all doing stuff all over. We should be collaborating, a unison of, okay, who's doing what in what city? Let's all, collaboratively come together and support, right? Because it's going to take a collective effort for sure. But thank you all for allowing me to be here. Yeah, let me who's nobody in the organizer? So I was gonna say whoever I can give it to Ron, and then he shared to everybody. But yeah, we could definitely give it to directly. Yeah. Okay. Family. I was born in Chicago. What's your email?
My email is Aura23476
Okay, and I'm gonna label it. I got it. Okay. Yep. Yeah, with family. I was born in Chicago, grew up in Michigan, then I went to Jersey to go to grad school, and I was there for about almost 10 years. Lansing. Yep. And then. Detroit. Yeah. I love Detroit. I did some organizing in Detroit when I was in college. Yep. I do. So here's my info. I'll put it on here. Thank you. Hi. Good, how are you? Yeah, it is. I mean, yeah. And she's licensed and barred in Cali, so yeah, we do a lot of work in Cali. Yeah.
So I'll get your contact too. So one of the things that I know we didn't have time to get into, but is the funding side, which is what you're doing. So I'd love to kind of talk a little bit more because I'm doing some work around that and looking at how do we build capital strategies and models to support, because I know that is the underlining piece.
Yes.
So
where are you located?
So I'm in North Carolina. However, I work for Democracy at Work Institute, which is based out of California.
Okay. Either way, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Because we go ahead. We work with all over. So the work I do is like legally it's federal. Okay. And so we work our clients in Cali, New York, Jersey, Illinois, everywhere. Really. Okay. And so we definitely can support you wherever you are. Okay. And I think it's the strategies. And one thing, so part of the Black Co-op matters that representation is what we don't have, and I get frustrated a lot, even within our community, the white supremacy thing, they'll hire a white firm that overcharges them, that don't know creative strategies, that don't understand their challenges, and so then they just go with the flow.
And especially around crowdfunding, seriously, I mean, so there was just a lot of stuff, and I saw where it was going, but I was like, I wanted her to talk a little bit more about that, but it was good. But I did just want to say, I'm going to follow you. I already tried to connect with you on LinkedIn, but I'll get this
and I'm always on LinkedIn.
Okay.
I'll respond.
Okay, good.
Pleased to meet you.
Pleasure to meet you.
Okay.
Hi.
Thank you.
The only thing that I wanted to piggyback on at the end was what you had to do with the last slide that you put up. And the one thing that I think is sorely lacking is organizational development. And I don't care if you're talking about, I woke up this morning and said, why not? You know what I mean? Because I got an email that was crazy. I got a call from the communications director of a city councilman. We were in a heated, we were on the same side, but we were in this heated meeting last night that took like 2 hours of my time, which is why I didn't get on the road. One of the reasons I didn't get on the road till late.
Wow, that's what I wanted. I'm like, listen.
Saying that you was stopping with the rain too. I saw you coming out. Didn't realize you was a presenter.
If we could ever get to the point of having common standards in our community that everybody buys into, like if you're black and you want to be a leader, that you buy into these common standards in terms of how we are governing ourselves, how we're mobilizing, and how we're reaching out. That thought just hit me this morning.
What do you like about this one? Now let's do this work of coming into the
Right. But we have to find a commonality at a time to do something.